In a significant move, the Nigerian Senate and House of Representatives has approved President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's request to declare a state of emergency in Rivers State. The approval came on Thursday, March 20th, 2025, during a plenary session of both chambers. Thank you for joining us on Standpoint. I am Theophilus Ilama. In a significant move, the Nigerian Senate and House of Representatives have approved President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's request to declare a state of emergency in Rivers State. The approval came on Thursday, March 20th, 2025, during a plenary session of both chambers. The request, read by Speaker of the House of Representatives, Abbas Tajuddin, cited ongoing political instability in the state as the primary reason for the emergency declaration. The President's letter outlined key measures, including the suspension of the state's governor, deputy governor, and all members of the State House of Assembly for 6 months. A sole administrator has been appointed to oversee the state's governance during this period. Despite a lack of clear evidence showing a 2/3 majority was met in the House of Representatives, Speaker Tajuddin confirmed that the request was approved, citing a quorum of 243 lawmakers present. In the Senate, the request was also approved after a closed-door session, with details not being disclosed to the public. Meanwhile, the sole administrator of Rivers State, Vice Admiral Ibokete Abbas, retired, says he will work with the traditional institution to de-escalate tension in Rivers State. He made a promise during a meeting with traditional rulers at the government house in Port Harcourt. With the state of emergency now in effect, attention turns to how the federal government will manage Rivers State's governance moving forward. It will be a robust discussion on the show today, as I have joining me on the program two lawmakers. Of course, they are Liberal Oshoma, a constitutional lawyer who will join us in the studio very soon, and lawyer and public affairs analyst Godspar Agbule, who is joining us via Zoom from Port Harcourt. Also, the President's Citizens Quest for Truth Initiative, Obiaroku Ndukwe, joins us from our Abuja studio to look at the intricacies involved in the declaration of the state of emergency. Thank you for joining me at this time. All right, so first of all, let's go to our Abuja studio. Obiaroku Ndukwe, if you can hear me, the President of Citizens Quest for Truth Initiative. If you can hear me, looking at the situation in Rivers State and the call for the declaration of a state of emergency by the President recently, and all of the developments that have come on board, there have been people who have said there have been diverse opinions on this declaration. So I would like to hear your own view on this.
Well, I've been in the studio since after the declaration of the state of emergency, and like I said, it actually came to me as a bit of surprise, because I was thinking that maybe they would have been given another opportunity as truce. You know, maybe there could have been another presidential meeting, you know, mediation by the president and other service chiefs and others. But, well, I don't know, to the president in his wisdom, and then maybe on the advice of the security chiefs, because I understand there was a meeting that day before the decision was taken. So I think that's why he decided to go that route. And don't forget that there was really cause for worry, not because of the political differences between the executive and the legislature, but because some threats were made prior to that day, you know, where some ex-militant groups, you know, threatened to blow up the pipelines. And they, true to it, they carried out their threats. There were about 2 or 3 incidents. So, and I mean, no president, like I said, would have just folded his hands and waited until whatever before nipping it in the bud, stopping the mess. So I think that's part of the reason why. Well, the constitutionality of it, I may not delve into that, but I also think that those who feel that the president does not have the right to declare a state of emergency or to remove a democratically elected government, they should also look at the issues and then efforts of the president. He has had several meetings, I mean, with all the parties involved before now, and unfortunately they were not able to, not even with the Supreme Court judgment, you know, which spelled out the issues clearly. So I think that there was no option left for the president aside, what he did. Anyway, like I said, they could have also had another meeting, and maybe that would have been the last warning, and then told the parties that if you don't go do this thing right in the next couple of days or weeks, I will be forced, to stop you. But some persons kept on advising from the sidelines and then seeking, thinking that it would have been easy for them to resist even the judgment of the Supreme Court. So that's why, the president was forced to do what he did. But like someone said, state of emergency is not a death sentence. It doesn't mean that's the end. It's just a means to an end. If the parties involved will use this period to look at, dialogue and look at the areas, the gray areas, and come to an understanding, I think we may have a shorter state of emergency. Maybe the 6 months, it could be shortened to 3 months or even less than that. It all depends on the key people involved, their ability to say, no, look, we don't need to be like some countries where democracy has been truncated. We made this possible because we walked into it. So let's go back home and redraw the map and re-strategize and see how we can settle this matter so that, they can return to office.
So looking at the two political gladiators there, that's the governor of River State, Simlalaye Fubara, and the minister of FCT, Wike. They are the two of them are at loggerheads, and this has escalated for quite some time. Do you think they will be able to sit on the same table to discuss this?
Well, I don't see any difficulty there. Like I said, it's a matter of concessions being made here and there. They had agreements before now. Before Fubara was, made the candidate for the PDP and eventually the winner of the election. Internally, they had their own agreements and they had their own discussions. And I think that even if the governor felt that there were some things he couldn't keep to, well, there's nothing wrong with making it plain, to his former boss and predecessor. And then, of course, even the minister himself also will probably maybe shift grounds. But you see, it's not just about Fubara and Wike. We are talking about two separate arms of government. We keep forgetting that there is a speaker and there are other members of the House of Assembly. So the issue here is, can the two arms of government actually decide to come together? The moment they do that, the people on the side will have no choice but to, align. But a situation where people keep grandstanding, that's where the challenge is. So I think that those who are lovers of democracy, lovers of the state, and lovers of the people involved can lend their voice and say, look, we need to get this thing done. Let's shift grounds, let's come together, irrespective of whatever we may have said to one another. We can actually do this and do it for the people of River State. And don't forget, it's not about them, it's about the people of the state and Nigeria as a whole. Because whatever happens in River State could have a spillover effect to other states. We've actually had even similar issues in other states, apart from the era of President Olusegun Obasanjo, when we had cases of governors impeached. We've not really had much of that except now. So now that the impeachment was kind of halted because of the declaration of the emergency rule, I think that the governor should be wiser to say, look, it's about me and it's about the position I occupy and it's about the family, the political family I came from, not just to dine and wine with strangers. Let me go back home.
All right, so let's go to our Zoom guest, Godspar Ebule, who is a lawyer and public affairs analyst. Godspar, what's your take on all of this? Now, the Nigerian Bar Association has condemned this decision by the federal government to declare a state of emergency. What's your take on all of this?
Okay, quickly, let me state that if you take a look at the provisions of Section 305, sub 3 of the Constitution, it provides a ground upon which the president can make a proclamation with respect to a state of emergency. Thereafter, that proclamation is sent to the National Assembly to ratify. Now, the question has always been asked, the facts that we have in Rivers State, can we say that there are apparent or imminent danger? The response to that will be very simple, that we may not know, the security information that the president has. And we all know that prior to that declaration of a state of emergency, that the president met with service chiefs, and I'm sure that the president was briefed. And thereafter, a state of emergency proclamation was made, and that proclamation was sent to the National Assembly for ratification. Then the other issue is with respect to whether in a state of emergency, whether the governor or functionaries of state can be suspended. For us to even answer that question, we need to actually know the purpose and the jurisprudence. They have know that the state of emergency itself is a proclamation of martial laws, which in certain circumstances and limitation of fundamental rights of individuals. That's the whole essence of a state of emergency. And that state of emergency doesn't mean that the governor has been removed. Of course, there's a difference. There is a clear difference between removal of a governor and suspension of a governor. If you take a look at the situation that we have now had, and taking a look further, the judgment of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has held in the case of Williams against.
I think we have some, okay. Godspur, I think we're having some network issues with you, but we'll just halt you there at this point and go to our studio. Constitutional lawyer Libros Ashoma has joined us to have this discussion. I saw your reaction when Ndukwe Obiaruku was talking about all of this. Of course, I would like to hear your interesting views on this. Of course, looking at also the fact that the NBA has openly opposed this declaration and all the reactions that have come from every quarter at this time.
Yeah, first and foremost, thank you. And I've listened to the views of my other panelists. And one thing that is clear in all of this state of emergency was not declared as a result of insecurity.
So what do you think it was? What was the reason?
From the analysis.
The president reeled out the reasons.
Even from the president's analysis, there was not as a result of insecurity. Otherwise, if it's insecurity, there will be setting up committee to reconcile the House of Assembly and the governor. No. It was set up, it was proclaimed purely, it's my opinion, but let me finish, please. Okay. Purely because the House, because even the what's its lady's name now, the guest also said that you referred to Wike and there are 27 lawmakers and all of that. So that impeachment, so since the governor, there was an impeachment process and all of that, the governor should see it as, it was impossible for the House of Assembly to break through that impeachment process.
Okay.
There are provisions in Section 188 that must be complied with. And this, do you know why the gale of impeachment under Obasanjo stopped? Because the Supreme Court ruled and put its foot down that impeachment processes must follow through subsection 1 to 9. And those section 1s to 9 are sacrosanct. And that the process of impeachment must be conducted in the place meant for the business of the House of Assembly. That is why you see recklessly every House of Assembly, every governor who feels threatened, the first thing, their target is to demolish the House of Assembly because they feel if that place meant for the business is no longer there, then they won't be able to carry out the business. That was why Fubara recklessly did that thing that he did. And so, the essence, when the members discovered that there was a log jam, they couldn't break through the chief judge. All of those issues of, oh, there is insecurity, they are contrived. They are all contrived. And that's why it was not like, oh, look, since they couldn't break through.
Okay.
And then, we now the government quickly referred to the pipeline destruction.
Yeah.
Do you know, go to NNPC website and just follow them. Every week in Niger Delta, they report one pipeline vandalization or the other. And they have men on ground to repair. And that is why the moment that pipeline was destroyed, in less than 24 hours, it was corrected. Do you know why? So, The boys that were said to be threatening to destroy pipelines were the Ijaw people. How come it happened in Ogoni land? And nobody, when the, what do you call it, the crisis happened in, what's the name of this place now in Delta State? Okoloma and Okwama. Soldiers were killed in cold blood. What did the military do? They condured off that area.
But the president also cited rising political tension.
The political issues had been resolved by the Supreme Court.
Okay.
Recklessly, the governor failed to recognize the House of Assembly members, which was not within his power to do. The matter were submitted before an arm of government that is statutorily and constitutionally responsible to deal with. And they dealt with it and said, go back and resolve and go back to status quo. And when parties went back, the House of Assembly sat, requested members of the state electoral body to appear before them. 3 members appeared before them, 1 didn't appear. Requested a budget to be presented. The governor wrote letters. So that means the business of the House of Assembly, the business of executive, was also coming on board. The members threatened to impeach. And there was a logjam. It was that logjam that created the tension. So all of this issue of contrived insecurity, when Okwama and Okoloma issue happened, the military condoned of that area, took care of the situation. Was the state of emergency declared in, that's danger. Was it declared in Delta State? The answer is no. Do you know why I'm opposed to all of this charade called state of emergency and suspension of a democratically elected government? Because Obasanjo started it. Today, I would want to look at Atiku writing statement. He was vice president at that time.
All right.
But today, I would want to see how Baba Obasanjo would feel now that it is not his party. The same thing, the same precedent that we are setting, that the APC is setting today. The position, the political office is that of a tenured monarch.
All right.
Someday, Tinubu will leave office. Another person will come and just use that same script to declare state of emergency in Lagos. That is why it is not good to set very bad precedents.
All right, so let's go to Zoom now. Godspire Agule, I'm sure your network might be okay at this point. So let's talk about the options available to the governor. What do you think will happen at this time? What can he do?
Okay, quickly, I wanted to clarify a point which the guest in your studio stated, that because the issues are political, that they do not give rise to a state of emergency. One, if you take a look at the first state of emergency ever declared in Nigeria in 1962, what led to the state of emergency? There were issues in the action group, in Western Nigeria, which led the prime minister to declare a state of emergency in Western Nigeria, and an administrator was set up. So I do not think that because issues are purely political, they cannot dovetail into imminent dangers, causing risk, to national assets and the rest. So even if the issues in River State are political, I do not think that the proclamation of a state of emergency by the president was just because of the political issues between the contending political parties. If you take a look at that proclamation of a state of emergency, the president made it clear, there is imminent danger, of a breakdown of public law and safety in River State.
Godspire, so hold on. What does the Constitution say? What's the requirement for declaring a state of emergency? What kind of danger was River State in for the president to declare a state of emergency?
Now, if you take a look at that, you must make recourse to the provisions of the Constitution, Section 305, sub 3. The provision of the Constitution didn't say that there must be war before you declare a state of emergency. It didn't say that the Constitution made it clear that if there is imminent danger, so the issue we should now be discussing is, was there imminent danger of any breakdown of law and order in River State before the proclamation of state of emergency? Because every set of facts must be treated within their peculiar circumstances. You may not use what has happened in another state to come and look at what has happened in River State. So you must look at the issue in River State separately within their peculiar circumstances.
All right, go on.
He modeled up the issue. He's comparing it to Operation Wet in Western region, where there was fight
Okay.
in the Western Region House of Assembly. In this case, the House of Assembly is sitting.
Okay.
In this case, as at the time the governor failed to recognize members of the House of Assembly, that means there was only 2 arms of government in Rivers State then. The matter was submitted to the jurisdiction of the court, and the apex court dealt with it and said, Governor, you are wrong. You cannot say you will not recognize. Is irresponsibility taken too far? And go back and represent the budget. And the federal government, until that budget is presented, don't release allocation to them. Until they do the right thing, don't release allocation to them. Why did the president intervene when one arm of government was completely shut down before the court gave judgment?
Okay.
And that was a good time to have even declared and say there is palpable tension that will give rise to emergency. But they waited for the court to determine the matter. After the court had determined the matter and gave a clarity to it, because the State House of Assembly could not break through an impeachment process, it is not compulsory. The governor clearly committed impeachable offenses. Let me just round up on this.
Okay.
Clearly committed impeachable offenses. But if you cannot muzzle the required support from the judiciary to do that, that is why, because it's a very delicate issue, that is why the Constitution required the 3 arms of government to work together. If you can't muzzle it, the federal government should not help you to do it.
Okay, so let's go to our Abuja studio now. Ndukwe is there to standing by us well. She has given her own view, and we would like to have more of your views on this situation. Some people have said this is about resource control as well.
Wow. Resource control by who? I don't get it. I mean, where's that one coming from? Because if you're saying resource control, you are talking about a state that is a multi-ethnic state. I mean, practically almost every ethnic group there has, their own resources. They have oil in their domain. So I don't know who is talking about it. I think that rather than talk about resource control, I think it's, or maybe if you're referring to the federal government taking over the resources of the states, I don't know, because they have heard such arguments in some places. But again, let me even ask a question.
All right.
Based on what my brother Liberals has just canvassed, did the president need to have waited until there was a fight, a physical fight between the executive and the legislature? You're talking about Operation Weche, where there was a fight within the assembly, and then there was a state of emergency declared. In this case, we are talking about 2 arms of government, so the only functional arm of government was the judiciary. And the judiciary was not even ready to help deal with the issue. The Supreme Court had given the judgment and told the governor, you were totally wrong to have used only 3 people for your state assembly, for not having a state budget, for seizing the allocation meant for the assembly, for pulling down and destroying the structure of the state, this assembly complex. The Supreme Court didn't mince words. And I'm even disappointed that the judiciary arm of the government in the state will not align with the Supreme Court, because they are both judiciary. So for them to have, even from what he's saying, because I don't know if the matter had gotten up to the point where they needed the support of the chief judge, that one is just hearsay. So, but in any case, with all intent and purpose, the chief judge, the judiciary in the state, ought to have aligned with the judgment of the Supreme Court and done the needful, assuming it had gotten to them that they wanted to impeach. The Supreme Court didn't, it wasn't even the assembly that declared that the governor, committed those impeachable offenses. It was clear from the Supreme Court judgment. But unfortunately, that judgment looks like a lame dog. He couldn't bite. He could only bark. Because, the governor kept on doing what he wanted to do. It was difficult for the state assembly to even get the commissioners whose appointments were illegal, because they were screened by an assembly that was illegal, the 3-man assembly. Now, the authentic assembly wanted them to appear before to explain. Since they didn't resign, the right thing would have been, even if the governor didn't drop them, they ought to have resigned, just like what happened with the local government chairman. So they refused to appear. Rather, they went to court against the state assembly. It's all part of the confusion. When we're talking of imminent danger, all this, are built up into that. So then the RISEC also came and announced that they were going to start the process of another election. That's another trigger for more crisis, because these other people in the assembly will feel that they will be also edged out. And don't forget, I've always said it. I don't know why people, keep pretending as if they don't know. The assembly people, the authentic assembly, were owed for 1 year and 7 months. And I felt that the right thing for the governor to have done the moment the Supreme Court gave that judgment was to instruct that their monies be released to them. It's another way of playing the politics. You understand? So he didn't do that. Rather, he said he was waiting for the CTC of the Supreme Court judgment. I mean, everybody felt that he was just buying time and delaying. Even the judgment from the Supreme Court, I'm sure his legal team knew that they were going to have a very bad day, because it was very clear from the High Court to the Appeal Court that the governor had a bad case. You know, so, but because they needed time and they were buying time to be able to do the things they wanted to do, they continued on that path. So at what point would have the president, look, I don't want to believe that the Fubara is the worst hit here. I think that rather the lawmakers are the worst hit, because they've not been paid. If they've been sitting, they had their own assembly, a makeshift assembly in the assembly quarters where they live. And don't forget, there was a day the governor visited that place and unannounced, and there was a threat to pulling down that place, and maybe where he claimed the structure belonged to him. So who knows what would have happened, and maybe they would have also been sent packing. So they had no choice. Then again, did they also want the state of emergency? I do not want to believe that that was a,
so looking at all of these developments now. Do you actually think, and you have mentioned some of these things, do you actually think that there would have been room for peace if the state of emergency was not in place?
No, there's no way. That's the truth of the matter.
Okay.
What the president has done was to send a signal. And I think that this is even what will now begin to make everybody to reason well and say, look, let's just come together and see how we can agree. If they do not want to do that, the emergency rule will stay, will remain. And people will see, until people begin to see that there is an attempt at peace, where their dialogue, people are shifting grounds. And don't forget that they all belong to the same political family. Forget about those who are meddlesome interlopers, who are coming now to advise and give advice that they didn't know when they started. I've always said that from the beginning. So this emergency rule is what will probably ensure that they decide to go back to where they started. And if they refuse to, well, so be it. The administrator continues his job. But for now, what Rivers people want to see is that there's relative peace, there's calm. Now, my brother Liberal said it was not about the bombing, the attack on the pipelines. And if you go to NNPC website, you see pipelines. Yeah, but you can see the speed. We had one at the Cotton Channel. The next day, we had one at Andoni. The next day, we had another one. The speed at which and Ogoni, these things are happening. Yeah, they don't really have to be Ogoni people. Ijo people, when you say Ijo, almost everybody claims to be Ijo. Some are part Ijo, some are half Ijo. And then some were conscripted into the struggle. They may not totally be Ijo, but they are part of the larger group. So when these things happen, and don't forget, there will also be people who want to take advantage of the crisis to do what they wanted to do. So the important thing is that the nation was being threatened, because that's where the economy actually depends on the oil. So there's no way we would have allowed this to continue. Right. So if this emergency rule is what will actually bring them to a common table, so be it.
All right, let's go to Zoom now. Hold on. Let's go to Zoom and talk to the lawyer there on this matter, Godspire Bule, on all of this. Now, do you think this will lead to a peaceful resolution?
Yes, I think so. I think that the declaration of a state of emergency will ultimately reduce the heightened tension in Rivers State, and also ultimately resolve the political situations that have escalated. But let me also add that as the constitutional democracy, and if you want to condemn any act of government, you must show that by the provisions of a constitution that has been outrightly outlawed. You know, nobody has any difficulty in comprehending the situation that we have in Rivers State and the reason for the state of emergency. Now, a lot of lawyers, public commentators alike, have expressed reservations with respect to the fact that that public emergency declaration came with suspension of the governor. And some have said the suspension of a governor is unconstitutional. And one question I usually want to ask is, by what provision of a constitution the constitution outlawed the suspension of a governor in the light of a proclamation of a state of emergency, because a state of emergency itself is a proclamation of martial laws, which in certain circumstances suspend democratic functionaries and limit fundamental rights. Now, the Constitution never stated anywhere that the suspension of a governor in the light of a declaration of a state of emergency is unconstitutional. And the challenge we have is that in the case of Plateau State against AG Federation, where the Supreme Court had the opportunity to give interpretation to suspension of a governor when there is a proclamation of state of emergency, now that matter was dismissed or struck out on technical grounds. So nobody can say that as of today, the Constitution outlaws the suspension of a governor when you have a state of emergency. The other argument that people seem to make is, oh, what if there's a state of emergency in the entire federation? Does it mean that the president will no longer be the president? The president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. He is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. So his position and that of the governor is entirely not the same. In a state or local government, when a state of emergency is declared, the democratic institution or functionaries are suspended. But in that of the president, he is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. Except there is a coup. No provision of state of emergency will move the president. I need to make this position clear. But my answer to your question is very clear, that I believe that this state of emergency will reduce the tension. I mean, since the declaration of state of emergency, have you seen any provocative statements from any of the contending parties? Of course, no. Have you seen any bombing? Of course, no. None. Because right now, everybody understands that we are in a state of emergency and certain rights are curtailed by virtue of that state of emergency. And if you ask me, I feel that the tension that we have in Rivers State have de-escalated by virtue of the proclamation of state of emergency that we have. Now, the question will now be, what will the contending parties do with it? For me, I think they can explore amicable resolution to all the issues that they have, which ultimately escalated the tension that we had in Rivers State.
Ask, you are in Rivers State. What are the feelers? What feelers are you getting from the people as regards the state of emergency and the declaration by the president?
Well, I think there may be no accurate data for.
I'm not asking for. I'm talking about what you have. Your discussions with people.
For me, prior to the declaration of state of the proclamation of state of emergency, we were living in a heightened, tensed environment, and nobody can dispute that. But I can tell you that as of today, the tension has reduced, and Rivers people would like a situation where they can go about their normal duties, pursue their economic means and make a living for themselves.
Was that not happening before? Was that not happening before now? I just want to clarify.
Except you were not in Rivers State. If you were in Rivers State, I mean, there were threats that the president would need to choose between the minister of the FCT or the quote-unquote the job people. There were such statements as, if the political tension continues, there will be no guarantee with respect to national assets. All of these were statements. And I'm saying that as of today, you won't find those statements, flying around again. So everywhere is now, the tension is being de-escalated, trade norms have been relaxed for the moment. People are not going about their normal duties. The challenge we have is that people always want to see bloodshed. They want to hear that 30 persons, 100 persons have died. And so that's the reason you would have state of emergency. You see, but when there is heightened tension, you can have a state of emergency to de-escalate it. Right. So I'm telling you now that the tension in Rivers State is gradually calming down, and every political actor, stakeholders, opinion leaders must now work with the administrator to make sure that we bring the situation to the barest minimum, where we will now have return to democratic governance.
All right, so we will go on a quick break, and when we return, we'll have further discussions on this. Stay tuned, this still standpoint developments. Now, before we move to the next agenda on our list, Liberals, let's have your own view on all of these discussions.
Please,
now.
Before I say anything, you give them enough time to talk. Relax. So please, give me
just relax.
Yeah, let's
be fair in the discussion.
Yes, we're looking at issues. Let's look at them dispassionately.
Definitely.
And I consistently maintain, because if you look at all of the issues that Gospower had referred to, the issues that my sister Albiaruko has referred to, these were pre the Supreme Court judgment. And those issues, we had also, a lot of lawyers also had condemned that the governor had no power, first and foremost, to demolish the State House of Assembly. Secondly, to de-recognize the members of the State House of Assembly. All of this pre the Supreme Court judgment. The moment the Supreme Court judgment came, the House of Assembly was sitting. So Section 11, subsection 4, you can't say that the House of Assembly of a state was not sitting. So the National Assembly cannot take over the responsibility of the House of Assembly of that state. And then, because when they talk about this state of emergency, they keep discussing the quarrel between the House of Assembly and the governor. And nobody is giving me empirical evidence as to the insecurity, the palpable tension, or the fear, or the challenges. And I have pointed to insecurity across the Federation that are even worse than this.
Well, how will you describe the issues that have been
my sister, Mrs. Obiaku, referred to somebody going to court that the State House of Assembly is not aligning with the Supreme Court. The State House of Assembly cannot always align with the Supreme Court. That is why you have Supreme Court, you have Court of Appeal, and you have Federal High Court, and you have the State High Court. So, and also it is a citizen's right to go to court. If citizens do not go to court, we won't have some of the erudite judgment that we have today. But when we condemn frivolous application, we also need to encourage citizens to approach the court when they feel that their rights have been threatened. And so in this case, all of these cases pre-Supreme Court judgment, and the Supreme Court issued a directive to the federal government, and the State House of Assembly sat, requested certain persons to appear before them. They appeared, and the governor also took steps. There is no way I will encourage anybody to apply a judgment that they have not studied. Let's leave out sentiment. And when the CTC of the judgment were released, some of us immediately had them, and we sent them all over. The governor studied and eventually wrote to the State House of Assembly. At this point, the State House of Assembly now found out that they had the upper hand. They started playing hide and seek. It's a notorious fact. And then the notice of impeachment started dangling. It was at that point that some persons, supporters of the governor, also started threatening. I also condemn the reckless statement by the governor that the boys I will tell you when to deploy. Those statements are reckless. But the question is, as at the time this state of emergency was declared, had the issues that my sister Obiaruku complained of, had they been resolved? Yes, the Supreme Court had resolved them. And then secondly, Gosfar talked about declaration of a state of emergency and suspension of a democratically elected government. Recently, last year, the APC approached the Supreme Court. Right. Why did they approach the Supreme Court? That governors were incessantly sacking local government, duly and democratically elected local government chairmen. And the APC, the federal government through the Attorney General, approached the court. And what was the position of the Supreme Court? That under no guise, I recommended that same judgment to Gospower and my sister Obiaruku. Under no guise can a governor suspend or sack a democratically elected local government council. They did not create a proviso in that judgment. They didn't say that except under state of emergency. The Supreme Court did not say except under a state of emergency. And we say, because what has happened here, and I also refer to the pipeline issues in Ogoni land, in Andoni and the rest. Can't other parties, take advantage of this situation and say, okay, yes, this governor, you made reckless statement. Let's do this. And that's why I keep referring to Okoloma and Okwama community. What did the military do? In the Northeast, what are the military doing? Pipeline, if every week, by next week, if you follow an MPC, pipeline consistently vandalization is happening every day. And so, is it every pipeline vandalization? So if they destroy pipeline in Ejigbo now, they declare state of emergency in Lagos. Now, as I speak to you, the State House of Assembly in Benue State is at loggerhead with itself, and the chief judge and the governor are not at peace with each other. Are we saying that because two arms of government cannot resolve their differences and that they submit to the jurisdiction of the court, and once the court resolves it, then we should declare state of emergency? And that's why no wonder somebody is having the temerity and effrontery to point to Oshu.
Let's leave it at this point. But let's also look at the new Ibok Ite-Ebas, his role in all of this and what he plans to do. What should we expect from him? He's now the sole administrator of Rivers State.
It's laughable for me, very laughable. The Supreme Court said there was no democratically elected local government officials in Rivers State. Budget was not presented to the House of Assembly. And so, for that, don't release allocation to the governor until that is done. And now, we have a sole administrator who there's no budget presentation, there's no duly elected local government council, and yet we have released funds to them. Is that not contrary to the same judgment that we're celebrating? And so also by extension, because Gospel talked copiously about, oh, the president is the commander-in-chief, the president is the commander-in-chief. If we say under a state of emergency as prescribed in section 305, if you look at subsection 3, it spells out the provisions under which a state of emergency can declare if the nation, the entire country, is at war. And in subsection 4, it also creates an opportunity for the State House of Assembly. It complies with the governor to request a state of emergency to be declared. So in that case, can a governor now invite you to come and sack him and sack the entire State House of Assembly and then appoint a sole administrator? That is why the drafters and the framers of the Constitution clearly provides for immunity for the governor and how allocations can be spent. So in a state of emergency, does the governor still enjoy immunity? So these are the basic questions. So I won't go into the issue of a sole administrator. We fought consistently for the ouster of military rule in Nigeria. But at every turn for political gain, we bring back the same military and say, come and solve situations for us. Are we not indirectly, the politicians, are they not indirectly telling the military that you own the key to the solution, to the peace solution in Nigeria? Is that not what we are doing? The same people that we fought to go back to the barracks?
All right, so let's go to God's Power in Rivers State now. God's Power, let's look at the legality of the appointment of the sole administrator of Rivers State.
Oh, okay. I have stated here earlier that for you to say that something is illegal, that thing would have been abrogated or outlawed by a statute or an act. I have said there is no provision of our law, inclusive of our constitution, where the governor can be suspended upon the proclamation of a state of emergency. And I've also said that anybody who says that the proclamation of a state of emergency and the suspension of a governor, if it is illegal, should please cite a law. If you even take a look at section 36 sub 12, something is not illegal until the National Assembly or the House of Assembly of a state or an act says such a thing is illegal. And I also want to make a clarification with respect to what the guests in the studio said. You see, there must not be war for that to be a state of emergency. Imminent danger, disruption, imminent danger and imminent disruption of public peace and order can lead to declaration of state of emergency. And there are certain circumstances, certain conditions that must be met. And those conditions have been specified in section 305 sub 3. The reason for which a state of emergency is proclaimed will determine whether you would still have democratic institutions. If we have natural disasters, of course, you and I know that there will be no need for the suspension of the government. But the situation that we have in Rivers State warrants that with a state of emergency, if a governor is suspended, nobody can say that such a suspension is not in line with the provisions of the Constitution. And again, I do not hold a view that it is because of the political actions that we have in Rivers State, the political contestations, that's why we have a state of emergency. The president has said that there were security reports and security concerns. Security concerns are not disputations that you take to court. The situations that we had in court were constitutional issues. The reason for the declaration of state of emergency were security issues.
What are the, if you're mentioning that there are security issues now, what are the security issues? Just hold on. Let's have.
Let me clarify. Let me say something. That security briefings are classified and confidential issues. You do not expect that the governor, the president, will relay all the security reports that he has. But I am saying that as a resident in Rivers State, as someone who lives in Rivers State, There were heightened tensions. Somebody said, oh, is it because when there is a bombing of a pipeline, then you declare a state of emergency? Okay, if you begin to declare a state of emergency because pipelines bombing, that means you declare a state of emergency in the entire federation, in almost every state in the Niger Delta. My answer to that is, what does the Constitution provide for the president to declare a state of emergency? It goes back to Section 305, sub 3. And I'm saying that imminent danger arising from the issues that we had in River State warrants that there should be a state of emergency to calm the situation that we had, the heightened tension that we had.
Okay, so let's move to Obiarako Ndukwe on this matter now. What's your own thought on all of this now? Two reactions from the gentleman here we've had. What's your own reaction now?
In all fairness, I think Liberals Oshoma, my brother, was one of the voices I heard loud and clear. You know, immediately after the Supreme Court gave that judgment, he condemned the actions of the governor. He spoke out loud, you know, and then also encouraged the governor to go ahead and implement to the letter the judgment of the court. But on this issue of the state of emergency declaration or proclamation or whatever we call it, well, they are lawyers, so they can argue back and forth. But the truth is that those of us who live in River State, who do business there, also know the tensions. Now, let me take us a little bit away from...
Hold on. You live in River State. Tell us about the tension now. Let's have an inkling into what has been happening in River State prior to this time. Okay, let me tell you what's been... Let me just give you, in a nutshell, you know, what the issues have been. You see, this... the Ijaw group, the people who claim they are Ijaws, and they are more in numbers. If you recall, there was a statement credited to the former minister, the minister for the FCT, when he said, that nobody should intimidate anybody. We are all one Rivers people, and nobody is more Rivers than the other, and nobody has the capacity, no ethnic group has the capacity, you know, of being violent more than the other. We are all on the street. We all know each other. So there was this tension. Now, what's the issue? The issue is that the people supporting the governor, that's the Ijaw group, those who are on the side of the governor, felt that, this is their turn, and they have produced a governor. You know, they have a governor from Ijaw extraction. And that if he is impeached or removed, of course, if he's impeached alongside his deputy, you know, the Speaker of the House, Martin Ameule, is Ikwere. Ikwere is upland. That's actually Wike's own, where Wike also comes from. You know, so they felt that if Fubara is removed, the Ikwere man will take over. Don't forget, Amechi is Ikwere, and Wike also is Ikwere. So to them, it will be like, you know, losing hold of power and giving it back, ceding it back to the Ikwere. So they felt that they would do anything they could do to ensure that Fubara remained in office. But again, the question is, assuming the assembly went ahead to impeach Fubara, Martin was not going to be governor. He would probably be there for 3 months and elections will be conducted. And the Wike, I know, definitely, since he brought the Ijaw person, of course, he has quite a number of Ijaw people around him who are also strong politicians and good administrators, who says an Ijaw man will not emerge again or it will not be zoned to that direction. So the issue of it must be Fubara, I think it was what created that tension, the Ijaw group and the statements they made. So there was this tension, and then the other groups now felt, oh, are we not also part of Rivers? Like I mentioned in one of my outings there, if you go to the Henry Willings Commission, the issues that raised that day, you will see it was all about the Ijaw dominance of Port Harcourt and River State. And so it looked like a reenactment of all that. So every group was trying to also hold their own side to ensure that they don't lose. So that's actually caused a lot of tension in the state. And then, of course, like he said, majority of the boys who are in the creeks who do these things are also largely from that part of the state. So it's not out of place if anybody said that there was tension and
and not just tension, they carried out even the threat. You heard the ex-militants, you heard some of them. Do I really need to mention names for you to know? It's all over in the news. They made it loud and clear that they would do everything possible to stop Fubara from being removed. It was not because, I mean, if any sensible person should know that even the Supreme Court, it was only short of saying that Fubara should be out of office. That was all remaining. When they described it that there was no governance, no government in Rivers State, it was acting like a despot. What again are you talking about? It's as good as saying that we had a military rule in Rivers State. And so, now that we have, let me call it, whether legal or illegal military rule now, so I don't think we should complain. The important thing is, what we need to do for the two groups to come together, they still have an opening at peace. It's not that they were suspended permanently. It's just a temporary thing. And so if they put their acts together and everybody goes back to factory reset, I think that there will be peace. And this whole argument of whether emergency rule is the right or wrong will be rested.
We quickly have to go. It's almost time's up, actually. Time's up, actually. I know you're itching to say something.
No, 1 minute. Just 1 minute.
We don't have 1 minute.
No, 1 minute. Okay, 30 seconds.
We don't have 30 seconds.
No, 20 seconds, please. Please.
Let's be fast about it.
No. See, seriously, like she said, I consistently condemn the actions of Fubara the same way I'm condemning the declaration of a state of emergency and the illegal imposition of a sole administrator. My position is the law. Anywhere the law goes, I follow. It is not about sentiment. Fubara, like I said, committed impeachable offenses. But you will need to pass through the hurdles created by the Constitution to be able to impeach him. That's simply what I'm saying.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Liberal Ashama, constitutional lawyer, for talking to us. And, of course, Godspire Abule, who is a lawyer and public affairs analyst in Port Harcourt. Thank you so much for talking to us. And, of course, Obiaro Kondukwe, the President Citizens Quest for Truth Initiative.